systems that are very much not net-enabled things act like net-enabled things on the battlefield, and that is too big of a learning curve to scale if you're facing an adversary at machine speed.
Martin, did you want to come in on that, and then Sarah?
Thanks. Having studied in the United States, I'm always cautious about going too far back in history about the success stories about how we collaborate. But perhaps if we go back a few decades, it was mentioned by the ambassador earlier on, but the 1958 Mutual Defense Agreement was born out of the Soviet Union Sputnik program and an absolute imperative to act. We're still using that today for the exchange of nuclear material both ways, UK and United States. And I think it is important when you look at the industrial aspects, we're building today our nation's next generation strategic deterrent, and it's in partnership with our United States brethren. So 1/3 of the Columbia class and the Dreadnought class are a common missile compartment. Now, that's really tough in nuclear terms, in policy terms, for those industries. And I think it's really helpful to have that dependency, and they are critical dependencies, because it keeps everyone on their toes. Sometimes when you look nationally at programs, we slice and dice things in a certain way, but if your closest partner is going to be affected by the actions you take, it makes you really pay attention and consult. So that'd be my first one, the fact that strategic alliance endures. If you take this ship, I was the last senior responsible owner for the carrier program, and I sat on an alliance board with industry partners. This is a complex warship to build, probably the most complex one we have ever built, because it was built around the UK in a modular fashion with new technologies, and it had a number of dependencies. So the F-35 program had to nestle into this ship. This is designed specifically as an F-35 aircraft carrier. But it was only, those industrial alliances were only so good if they were matched by the policy intent. And I would just focus on the carrier cooperation statement of intent between the UK and US, brought together Royal Air Force, Royal Navy. It brought together US Marine Corps, US Navy, with a common aim from a policy perspective to be truly interchangeable from the initial capability. So blending policy arrangements with industrial alliances, I think, is the real opportunity.
Sarah, to you, and I'm also wondering what what examples you might be able to give of the role of industry in supporting alliances in the past.
Glad to, and happy to be here. I actually plan to echo and highlight the nuclear deterrence that the Admiral just hit on in his opening remarks there. From an industry perspective, we see the decades-long partnership with nuclear deterrence as very successful. So from an industry perspective, why has that been? A couple of things that were just hit on. There's clarity and mission and shared understanding. Very strong leadership at the Royal Navy, at the US Navy, as far as the mission and our deliverable when it comes to the industry perspective. And then secondly, we have clarity and vehicles, whether it's the NDA or the Polaris sales agreement, on how to operate, what the rules of engagement are. And we have that type of clarity and that focus on a mission and a deliverable. I think it only empowers industry to be able to deliver the capability, work cohesively and collaboratively, and we don't have that hesitation or, let's say, the asking, if you will. We know what the boundaries are, we know what we need to deliver, and that would be, one of my main messages is that clarity really accelerates our ability to deliver and get it to the hands of the government.
Can I ask a bit about alliances? We heard in the opening panel there was a kind of, I think it's fair to say, there was a kind of consensus on the importance of NATO. It's just over a year since the announcement of the AUKUS agreement between Australia, the UK and the United States. And I wanted to ask each of you, maybe Martin first and then Stephen, what challenges loom the largest around that and what can we do to combat them?
I think it's very easy and very tempting to perhaps jump in at what those challenges might be. And there are a number, skills, how you build a capability from scratch in another nation, how you can use the industrial base from three nations smartly. But you've also got to balance that up with the opportunities, right? So I think we've got very strong bilateral relationships, clearly UK-US and UK-Australia and Australia-US. How do you blend that together in a smart way? That is a real opportunity for us, and that will unlock, I'm sure, how we can work smarter from an industrial perspective. And then there are the things that are offsets from AUKUS. There's an imperative to get the Pillar 1 nuclear cooperation right, and I think that is, in the next few months, we'll see where that goes. Pillar 2, we're working in tandem, and then there'll be things that develop further from that. And I'll just give you one example. We're building a Type 26 frigate, a global combat ship. Australia is buying a derivative of that, as are Canada. Now we have opportunities in terms of supply chain, schedule, purchasing power, maintenance, repair, overhaul, that we've not had in a while. Now, I don't care if someone brands that a spin-off of AUKUS or whether that's a UK, Australia, Canada thing, but the opportunities as navies, we certainly see.
Echo a lot of that. I mean, I've described AUKUS, particularly Pillar 1, as the most significant security collaboration in the last 60 years, really, since the NDA of 1958, and that is true, and it is important to recognise the enormous commitment that the UK and the US have made to Australia in pledging to share its sort of kind of nuclear secrets. I mean, this has never really sort of going to happen before outside that 1958 moment, and it happened quickly. The 1958 moment took 11 years from inception to actually happening, and AUKUS sort of kind of moved at warp speed in comparison. That, I think, is a response or a reflection of the threat that it is seeking to address, and it gives the opportunity for a very different sort of kind of Western Pacific security posture. It gives a really big opportunity for what is sometimes a slightly subscale British nuclear enterprise to become a sort of kind of properly scaled thing with a much larger batch size and so on. If I was to pick one area where I think there will have to be, I've mentioned information sharing. That is a really, really, really big deal, and we've got to get that right. And actually, as it happens, the work that we've been doing over the last year started off with information sharing and trying to get those protocols right. So that's an important part of it. If I was to identify another area which we are definitely going to have to think really, really hard about, it's the Australia's accession to the status of a nuclear, a power that is operating nuclear-powered submarines, and what that means by way of stewardship of nuclear materials, standards, regulation, disposal. All of those things are massively important, and it's a one-way valve, and you've got to get them right. So those are things that we're going to have to work on.
Specifically when it comes to AUKUS, Sarah, what's the key role of industry in supporting kind of delivery that's needed?
I think the most important step is having industry at the table. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to deliver capability, but up front, we can understand the threats and be very candid about feasibility. And then industry can also tailor our investments based on that knowledge. But that all requires us having a seat at the table up front and being able to contribute to the larger scene, and again, provide the perspective of industry, including connecting dots. Often we have ideas, whether it be small businesses that we're working with, or maybe it's test capability that governments may not be aware of, because we do work across the globe with different supply chains, with different governments, and so we can help connect those dots and get capability there faster. Of course, us speaking up and sharing candidly where we are as, in the technology sector.
I want to come back to you just a second, Sarah, but Will, the follow-up obvious question is, so assuming that industry and government, are sort of talking together, in the race for technological supremacy, what areas should be prioritized to get kind of advantage over adversaries?
There are a lot, but I think the comment that I had earlier is where I would begin, is that the industrial landscape is changing via digitization, digital engineering, and Industry 4.0. And if we're not interoperable and at least sharing common approaches there, we'll be building systems that we're not sure are going to be compatible with us. So you could agree to begin collaborating there today, and you should. I think the area, if you move past the way we build things to the things we build, that's going to be the most challenging, where we should have the most thought from industry and the government, is in the area of autonomy, which has become a buzzword. I mean, it almost doesn't mean anything anymore, and we have some very little of it. And the systems that we call autonomous are really not, and that they require a large number of people to operate, sometimes more than the systems that we call crewed. And when I think about...
Can you give an example of one of those?
Sure.
systems?
I mean, for our vehicles that are remotely piloted, even with a high degree of autonomy, even systems like this still have to have a large amount of crew to support them. I think when we say autonomous, we really mean something that is more you send it and forget. You know, true autonomy that reduces in a radical way the number of people that have to be involved. But there's a rub there. Today, we act as a coalition force by putting a lot of kit out into the field. We ask them to sort it out. Often things are not built to work together, and I have found throughout my career that operators in the field are tremendously creative in making systems work together in a way that makes you ashamed if you're the person providing them the technology. That's not going to work for autonomy. If the US approaches autonomy one way, the UK a different, Australia a different way, there's no guarantee that that will be interoperable with each other. There's not going to be the speed of trust that we share today, person to person, making radio calls and looking people in the eye. It has to be based on standards that are ultimately digital in nature. So I think we're very comfortable putting the burden on operators to figure it out, to sort it out in the field. Our operator is going to expand to be autonomy and artificial intelligence. And if we don't think ahead of the need for it to work together, it won't in the field. And a lot of what we enjoy today, presenting an aligned coalition front, will not be the case when it comes to autonomous systems.
Thank you so much. Sarah, your thoughts on the same issue then? What should be prioritized?
I think, first of all, speed, and that was hit in the earlier panel. Regardless of technical genre, the need for our acquisition, our programmatics, and our engineering to move at speed so that our technologies are available ahead of the need. Right now, I think we could all imagine that we can deliver almost any technical capability. The most important thing is, can we get it there in time, and is it relevant? So speed, and that is how we work. And I don't think it's just engineering. I think it spans the entire life cycle of these products. And I'll emphasize, which I think Dr. Roper just hit on, open architectures. It's really easy right now sometimes to paint yourself in a corner as engineers, see what tools are available. We really need to have architectures that are modular and flexible for the future, because new technologies are going to emerge as well as threats. And if we've painted ourselves into a corner, we certainly won't be agile or be able to rapidly respond to the threat.
Martin, what's your perspective on this specific issue then, how businesses and armed forces can better collaborate?
So I think it was referred to earlier on, I think we've got to look at seriously breaking the life cycle dissonance between platforms and capabilities. From a Navy perspective, we build ships like this for 40 or 50 years. It's absurd to think that the capabilities designed today are going to be operating in 40, 50 years. And we've got to apply that quite seriously across everything we do. And that, I think, gives us opportunities if we get that right. Just over there, it's just an experiment at this stage, but we're looking to take a lot of those data-driven and autonomous capabilities and be a bit more expeditionary about how we procure them and get them into areas. Yes, there's an integration challenge there. We're certainly up for that. Rather than building in from the outset those capabilities, you don't then moderate and change that design, and it becomes quickly obsolete. I think we all realize that we've got to find the right commercial framework to enable that.
One other big question I want to ask Will first and then Stephen. Should we be doing more to protect and even kind of wall off critical technologies from malign actors, even if it's at the price of what we've just been talking about, which is more collaboration and innovation?
There are some that should be, that we would not expect to come to us from the private sector, but I really believe, the previous comment, that it's speed that matters, speed and agility in this age, that your ability to take a new technology to market faster than your opponent is what counts. And in the case of peer competition with a nation like China, any idea that we've had, they've had. Any technology we're working on, they're working on. What matters is the ability to develop it faster, operationalize it faster, and build proficiency with it faster. I think if we had harnessed that, we would feel pretty good in that we trust our operators with the technology we create.